In a shocking twist that left viewers stunned, the bold and the beautiful reveals one of its most intense and devastating emotional arcs yet. What begins with a postponed fashion show, a professional disappointment for Brooke, quickly escalates into a bitter personal vendetta. What was supposed to be a triumphant event that would mark Brooke's continued legacy in the fashion world is suddenly interrupted and postponed. Who does Brooke blame for the chaos? None other than Taylor. While the circumstances surrounding the postponement remain unclear, Brooke believes Taylor intentionally caused the disruption by locking her backstage. While Taylor insists it was a misunderstanding, Brooke refuses to believe the action was accidental. The ensuing confrontation is both intense and revealing. Brooke confronts Taylor in front of Ridge Forrester, making accusations and making it clear that she believes Taylor's actions were calculated and malicious. Instead of standing up for Brooke, however, Ridge immediately defends Taylor, claiming that if any harm was done, it was unintentional. This moment of betrayal leaves Brooke deeply hurt. Not only is she publicly humiliated by the failed fashion show, but the man she has loved for decades is once again siding with another woman. And not just any woman, but Taylor, her arch-rival. For Brooke, this moment symbolizes everything she has fought to prevent. Ridge is slowly slipping away, inch by inch, back into Taylor's arms. She begins to view Taylor through an increasingly paranoid lens as not just a rival, but a calculating manipulator, capable of appearing innocent while orchestrating chaos behind closed doors. Brooke begins to dig deeper into Taylor's past, focusing specifically on the time Taylor claimed to have a heart condition, a condition Brooke now believes to be fabricated. In her mind, this so-called medical crisis is nothing more than an elaborate ruse to gain Ridge's sympathy and pull him back emotionally. The realization that Taylor would stoop to feigning illness only fuels Brooke's already burning resentment. Unwilling to remain passive any longer, Brooke decides to confront Ridge directly. She finds him at the Forrester estate and begs him to see Taylor for who she really is. She urges him to reconsider his loyalties and begs him to recognize Taylor's manipulations. But Ridge, calm and resolute, refuses to listen. His frustration with the ongoing drama between Brooke and Taylor reaches a boiling point, and he coldly informs Brooke that he doesn't want to see her again, not now and probably never. Devastated, humiliated, and burning with rage, Brooke returned home. Alone, she poured herself a glass of wine, and then another and another. The alcohol numbed her pain, drowned out the echoes of Ridge's rejection, and fueled a rage she could no longer contain. Her mind was clouded by a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, hurt, jealousy, and a deep fear that she would lose everything and everyone she had ever loved. Under the influence of alcohol and an emotional collapse, Brooke made a decision that would change her life forever. With shaking hands and a sense of broken judgment, she stormed out of the house and drove straight to Taylor's house. Even she herself wasn't sure if her intention was to confront, to scream, or to do something she couldn't yet identify. But what happened next crossed a line no one thought Brooke would cross. Arriving unannounced, Brooke burst into Taylor's house. The confrontation was immediate. Words were exchanged, accusations flew. Taylor, caught off guard, tried to defuse the situation, but Brooke, consumed by drunken rage and years of emotional baggage, was enraged. In a moment of terrifying impulse, Brooke grabbed a nearby object that appeared to be a kitchen knife and lunged at Taylor. The attack was brutal. Brooke stabbed Taylor multiple times in the stomach, each thrust born not just of anger, but of a lifetime of rivalry, pain, and perceived injustice. Taylor collapsed, gasping for air, blood pooling beneath her. Brooke, gasping and disoriented, stared in horror at the horror she had just unleashed. The rage evaporated, replaced by paralyzing fear. Her hands shook. Her breathing became labored. The full weight of her actions crashed down on her like a wave of guilt. Realizing what she had done, Brooke fled the scene. Stumbling out into the night, she climbed into her car, hoping to escape, disappear, pretend it had never happened. But her body was still drunk, her mind still reeling. In desperation, she swerved off the road and crashed. The impact was instantaneous, the devastation devastating. Brooke Logan died at the scene, alone in the dark, her final moments filled with terror and regret. Ridge entered Taylor's home, only to be greeted by a scene of unimaginable horror. Taylor lay motionless on the floor, blood pooling beneath her, her body riddled with stab wounds. The woman he had shared his life with, raised his children with, and loved for decades of turmoil, was now slowly disappearing before his eyes. Ridge was momentarily paralyzed, then immediately fell to his knees, cradling Taylor's bloody body in his arms. His hands shook as he held her close, whispering her name, urging her to stay with him, tears streaming down his face. He cried out for help with shaking hands, barely able to process the gravity of what he was seeing. His cries echoed throughout the room, a raw, guttural expression of loss that shook the foundation of the Forrester family to its core. Paramedics arrived on the scene, pulling Taylor from Ridge's arms as they began life-saving procedures. But the injuries were severe. Ridge, his shirt soaked with Taylor's blood, stood silently, recalling every word, every decision, every conflict that had led to this moment. He thought of Brooke, how she had warned him about Taylor, how she had begged him to reconsider, how he had completely written her off. Guilt began to seep into his consciousness like poison. Before Ridge could process what had just happened to Taylor, another heart attack hit him like a tidal wave. A call from the hospital brought the devastating news that Brooke had been in a car accident. She was drunk and disoriented, and despite CPR efforts, she had died. Brooke Logan, the woman who had loved him unconditionally through decades of turmoil, was gone. Just like that. In one night, Ridge had lost the two most important women in his life. The weight of that reality hit him with full force. He collapsed into a hospital chair, clutching the phone, his knuckles white, his breathing uneven. His eyes were wide with shock, unable to process the rapid succession of losses. For Ridge Forrester, time seemed to stop. The world went quiet. He couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't speak. The man who had spent his life at the center of romantic power struggles, the breadwinner of his family and his fashion, had just witnessed the utter destruction of everything that had ever mattered to him. When Steffi and Thomas arrived, they found their father hollowed out, a shell of the man they had known. Ridge tried to tell them what had happened, but the words barely came out of his mouth. He kept repeating the same phrase over and over again. They're gone. They're both gone. His children surrounded him with support, but they were also processing their own trauma. Their mother was in critical condition. Their father was falling apart before their eyes. And the woman they had grown up knowing as a fierce presence in their lives, Brooke, was dead. As the investigation unfolded, the tragic timeline became clear. Brooke, overwhelmed by Ridge's rejection and consumed by jealousy and rage, had drunkenly attacked Taylor. Minutes later, racked with guilt, she fled the scene and crashed her car. Ridge, learning the full extent of what had happened, was devastated. Even though he had not directly attacked any of the women, he began to internalize every mistake. He had rejected Brooke. He had chosen Taylor. He had refused to see Brooke when she needed to talk. In his mind, every decision he made was a domino effect leading to death and destruction. The pain began to affect Ridge's mental state. In the days after the tragedy, he became increasingly unstable. He avoided people. He stopped showing up at Forrester Creations. He refused to go home. Instead, he isolated himself in his parents' old estate, where he and Taylor had raised their family. Alone in the house filled with memories, Ridge began talking to people who weren't there. He imagined Brooke sitting on the couch, brushing her hair, smiling at him. He saw Taylor by the fireplace, laughing with the kids. These images became more real to him than the world around him. Doctors were called. Worried about his deteriorating mental health, Steffi and Thomas scheduled appointments with psychiatrists. At first, Ridge resisted treatment, believing he didn't need help. He insisted that he was just grieving, that he would recover. But his behavior became increasingly erratic. He forgot about conversations. He talked to people who weren't in the room. He disappears for hours and returns without knowing where he went. The mighty, always calm Ridge Forrester begins to lose his grip on reality. He finally broke down at a private memorial for Brooke. Standing in front of her picture, he began to speak directly to her. His voice was shaky. He asked her why she left him, why she didn't wait, why she didn't give him another chance. Then, in front of friends and family, he collapsed to the floor and began to sob uncontrollably, screaming his apologies into the air. There was no denying it. Ridge was no longer emotionally stable. He was admitted to a private psychiatric and rehabilitation facility. The diagnosis was grief-related psychosis caused by extreme trauma, loss, and unresolved guilt. Doctors explained that Ridge's mind had created alternate realities as a way to protect himself from the unbearable truth. It would take him months, possibly, to begin to heal. The Forrester family is left to deal with the aftermath, not only of Brooke's death and Taylor's hospitalization, but also of Ridge's mental breakdown. Steffi takes over Forrester Creations, while Thomas steps in to support her and ensure the family legacy continues. Hope, devastated by the loss of her mother, finds herself torn between anger and understanding. She knows Brooke made bad choices, but she also knows her mother was deeply hurt. She begins to visit Ridge in the facility, trying to comfort him, but each visit leaves him emotionally drained. Ridge rarely recognizes her. Sometimes he mistakes her for Brooke. Other times he cries uncontrollably, repeating the same words, "I didn't mean for this to happen." As the weeks turn into months, small signs of progress appear. With intensive therapy, Ridge begins to remember details more clearly. He begins to understand what is real and what is not. He writes letters to both Brooke and Taylor expressing regret, grief, and love. One day, in therapy, he admits that he no longer knows who he is without them. His identity has become entwined with the love triangle that defined his life, and now both women are gone, one dead, the other silent, healing far away. Meanwhile, Taylor survives her wounds, but decides to leave Los Angeles for a while. Though her body is healing, her emotional scars run deep. She decides to travel abroad, seeking peace and a new beginning. She leaves a letter for Ridge, which he eventually reads in a quiet moment at the facility. In the letter, Taylor forgives Brooke. She says she understands that grief can take people to unimaginable places. And she forgives Ridge, not for choosing her, but for not knowing how to love both without hurting herself in the process. The bold and the beautiful ends this tragic chapter not with resolution, but with reflection. Ridge, once a symbol of control and confidence, is now a man learning to rebuild. Brooke, a character defined by passion and determination, leaves behind a legacy both glorious and tragic. Taylor, the survivor, goes peacefully but carries the scars of a life shaped by brokenness. And the families they touched, Logan, Forrester, Spencer, are left to pick up the pieces, each of them forever changed. This heartbreaking storyline will go down in bold and beautiful history as one of its most emotionally charged. An exploration of the human condition at its most fragile, and a reminder that even the strongest hearts can be broken when love, guilt, and loss collide.